else I'm gonna do? I am going to make myself less attractive so as to not encourage any inappropriate feelings. Okay, that's hilarious, but you know what? No. I'm gonna stop thinking about you.
I'll be honest with you all, I'm not really a fan of rom-coms. I don't begrudge people liking them, I get it. They're nice and cozy and leave you feeling warm inside, that's half the idea. I think it is very easy to rip into them, but it's also not entirely fair, so I'm not going to do that. Nonetheless, I tend not to enjoy them because they make me roll my eyes at the forced, overly idealistic, overly dramatic romance. I think they'd like to present love like an elusive form of magic where, despite a tension of will they, won't they, everything is basically magical and divine, and it's not. Nothing ever is. Like, I understand why people adore Love Actually so much. It's a simple, relaxed, cozy Christmas film, but I don't really like it. A lot of the supposed magic in it seems a bit creepy. In what worlds does your best friend get married to a girl you love and you offer to film the whole wedding, but only film lots of close-ups in a very stalkerish way of her face, and when she sees the video she finds it sweet rather than stalkerish, and you then wait until after they're married to confess your love to her, and you do it by going to her house with a load of signs, hoping like hell the bloke doesn't answer the door because I don't know what happens then, and then silently letting her read them. And then again, rather than either A, finding it creepy, or B, gently letting him down because you're married and you don't want him to be strung along, you instead go out and kiss him before running back to your husband. What's going on? I'm being a bit unfair and taking the mick for the fun of it, really, but yeah, not often a fan of rom-coms. However, Dan in real life is a bit different. I was recommended it by a patron who wanted me to analyse the main character, which I'll try to do here a bit, maybe. If not, I'll do that elsewhere, but it's a rom-com. Dan, played by Steve Carrel, is a single parent in a hectic household of 3 daughters, and his wife died 4 years back. On his own, he's trying his best to keep the family going whilst also writing a column in the local paper called Dan in Real Life, which is about his struggles as a parent, about family, and about offering some advice through his personal experiences. I'll say it now to keep this video clear. I thought the first half of this film was absolutely brilliant. I couldn't have loved it any more than I did, and then the second half I started to notice some problems, which I'll get to some of a little bit later, but it's still a very good film. So the question is, why do I like this where I don't like most rom-coms? That's, I suppose, what this video is going to be. To answer some of that now, I guess you could say the emphasis isn't on the magic of love and romance, but instead on the frustration of it. The stupid ways it can make us mad and petty and almost childish, which obviously provides a lot of scenarios for comedy, which we'll get to. But I think a lot of the time romance genres in general can leave their protagonists a little bland in order to let the audience project themselves onto them. They're normally like nice people, somewhat down on their luck, who are a bit awkward around people and probably also clumsy, because clumsy is like that trait designed to be a character flaw but also sort of makes the character even more perfect because it's adorable at the same time, you know? This is a tangent actually, but why is it the slightly anxious or clumsy characters in romance only ever get shy or clumsy in front of their crush as a means to stage adorable tension? Like, why don't we see them get anxious when they're walking on their own down a street, or like trying to zip up their coat but they can't get the zip in place and they're worrying that people are watching, so they just settle to pretend they're inspecting the zip or something and keep the coat open to save them looking like a fool to these imaginary people that are supposedly judging them for not being able to do up a coat. Why doesn't that ever happen? I also think the whole dead partner to elicit sympathy thing regularly gets romanticised when it's actually obviously a very sad thing. And this film has a character of a dead partner, I guess, but it's not done for romanticisation so much. This film begins with a great shot of Dan waking up in bed, rolling over to where his wife would have been, sighing, and then zooming out to show us her half of the bed is covered with books from his work. Which is good characterisation told visually here, running from his grief or his loneliness through work. And he allows himself no longer than 5 seconds to feel sad before pulling himself together.
Okay.
I very much like that. It's sad. We're shown it's very sad, but also this is someone who doesn't have time to feel sad because A, he's got a job, and B, he's a single parent for 3 daughters. We see him at work in this very dark house looking very, very lonely, like some Edward Hopper painting, and then sunrise comes and his daughter's awake and suddenly he doesn't look quite so lonely, which is a nice kind of, not paradox, whatever the word is, a good and bad. Looking after his daughters causes great stress, more of which we will see in time, and it gives him no breathing space to reflect on his feelings. He has to get on and he must be so exhausted. But also they give him a purpose and belonging and love. Without them there, he would be truly lonely. He would have no reason to get up in the morning. They don't support him, no, not in a way a partner might. They spend more time arguing or telling him they hate him, but deep down still they do love him and he loves them. Nonetheless, I suppose the characterization I'm kind of drawing attention to is this stress and conflict that centers mostly around examples of Dan protecting his kids and wanting to keep them young. Jane isn't allowed to drive despite being grown up. Kara has a boyfriend at an age where Dan thinks she's too young for it.
Actually, I'm here for Kara.
Nice to meet you, Marty. Come back in 2 years.
And the youngest Lily is meant to be his innocent child who depends on him and who he can take out on fun trips. What we've got here is somebody trying to keep his daughters young, because if they're young and dependent on him, then they're close. Then they feel his loneliness and the hole his wife left behind, which obviously they can feel. Obviously children can be your purpose and your sense of belonging, and that is often enough, but you've also got to let them go at some point. To still be there when they need you, but to let them fly free as well, and that can be scary.
If you don't let me, I'll never learn.
But if I let you, you may not live.
Having devoted so much of your life and all this stress and sacrifice, to suddenly realise they're seeking to explore independence, and suddenly realising you actually sort of depend on them too. That's a tough stage of being a parent. Not that I know anything about it, but still. The film devotes a good amount of time to this struggle and these conflicts within the family, and that's very important as to why this film works and feels genuinely grounded beyond just airy-fairy perfect romance. We're given proper time to see Dan's loneliness without it being dramatised too much, but just being there in an ordinary human underlying way as he goes about his life, and the general conflicts of the family and being a dad itself. And then they go away for a holiday with the extended family that they have every year, and his daughters are relieved to spend time with other family members that aren't their dad, which obviously he doesn't like because he's suddenly forced to face his loneliness again, and the big question that is looming more and more every year. What do I do when my daughters are all grown up? And it's kind of only now romance gets injected. He bumps into Marie in a bookshop, and there now is a bit of the idealised rom-com magic stuff where we get a montage of them talking in the most aesthetically pleasing building I've ever seen. So I'm not saying this film is without all that rom-com magic stuff that I normally roll my eyes at, but I think it's the characterisation that makes the difference. We're given a solid time to explore Dan's life without just like sympathy baiting or just focusing on the he's lonely and needs a partner aspects. And the premise is quite straightforward. Dan meets Marie and has this good time just talking in a cafe until she gets a call. He realises she has a boyfriend and off she goes. Dan comes back in a strange mood, which he gets prodded about to reveal he's met someone, so they're now all really excited and asking questions, where Dan's brother Mitch comes in with his girlfriend, who is, shock reveal, Marie. The interesting thing though is that the tension isn't so much a will they won't they tension where it's sad they're so parted when they're obviously meant to be together. The tension isn't even really them trying to keep their feelings secret from Mitch, because we're not even sure Marie feels mutually about Dan at this point. She's got a boyfriend. Instead, the tension is Dan's total frustration with her for existing, for suddenly making his loneliness feel 10 times worse, because now he's fallen for someone he can't have, and it makes him angry and very petty. And that's the tension. Can Dan stop his brain from exploding? And we really get to see his pain and frustration in this film, which makes for great comedy that Steve Carrel is probably the ideal actor for. We get a cool shot where everybody's going to bed and they all shut the doors with Dan's left standing in the dark before going down to this bleak room where the tumble dryer is running all night. Or he's getting restless at the dinner table, hurrying things on with dessert to try and break up Mitch and Marie talking about how they met each other, using a knife on the dessert just a little too forcefully. Or when he wants to escape Marie by taking his daughters out on a trip, they say no, he's forced to take kids from the extended family instead, and all the places he tries to take them to have closed down.
Life is full of disappointment, big and sometimes even bigger.
And then he finds himself with them standing before a lighthouse, attempting to ramble something interesting about it to these kids that accidentally becomes an expression of his situation.
Because when you're out there and you're being tossed back and forth by those big dark waves and you think that you'll never feel land again and that you could just split into a million pieces and sink down all the way down deep, it's the light that keeps us on course.
The pain and frustration is funny. This isn't a film trying to drown us in sympathy over Dan's pain with some dramatic piano. It's instead making us laugh about it. That, I feel, is what makes this a more grounded rom-com. Whereas Love Actually, for example, it's unfair to use that as the stock example, but still, takes the sad moments to elicit sympathy and then has to manufacture the comedy out of the romantic moments themselves, adding contrived awkwardness, like Colin Firth being dumb enough to have his only copy of his novel on paper directly next to water. Dan in real life doesn't need to squeeze comedy out of the romantic moments, but can just let them breathe naturally and have that bookshop scene quite a nice romantic bit, because all the comedy can instead come through the pain and frustration. And equally, we also get to see it flip, where Dan gets set up on a date elsewhere, which is when Marie suddenly realises she's actually jealous and suddenly she's become the petty one.
Here we go. Coin toss, outside.
And I like that about this film. Sometimes romance isn't perfect, sometimes people act like complete idiots. Which can be very dangerous, obviously, and in many situations would raise a lot of red flags, but in a lesser sense, we can also basically understand some of the unjustified frustration, particularly when we're young, I think. It's exaggerated here for comedy, but we can empathise. He does still feel annoyed, and her presence in the same house as him is only confirming his loneliness 10 times over. It hurts. The thing that lets this film down a little bit for me is the fact the ending is a perfectly neat ribbon. Obviously it needs its loving, cosy conclusion, that's rom-coms, but I don't think quite every element should have had a happy conclusion. Mitch, for example, should be pretty devastated when his girlfriend leaves him for Dan, but his anger only really lasts like a scene before he's fine. I'd rather the film had ended with him unhappy and that he could consciously forgive his brother and Marie, understanding that they must care for each other, but still feel pretty torn up because he'll need a lot of time to move on. And in general, Dan's romance with Marie leads to a moment of total destructive mess in the family, and there's the conflict of can his personal need for love be balanced with his responsibility to his family? And the answer is yes, but it's tricky and should have ended more with that balance, a thing that's got hope of being reached rather than suddenly being reached in a magical instant. Dan kind of just gives a speech to his daughters that focuses a bit too much on the realisation he loves Marie rather than talking about the fact their mum is gone and that he'll always miss her and Marie won't be a replacement, and he's sorry he's focused a lot on himself recently, but sometimes he needs to. Sometimes being a dad all on his own is very, very hard, and he tries his best to look after them, but he feels he needs someone too that can support him. That's the point I think this speech should have put more emphasis on. But I don't want to get too much into criticising this film because it is basically an entertaining comedy and it's good at that. Yeah, the point is, I guess I don't hate rom-coms because this is technically one and I like it. It's good because it's not just a romance. It's arguably more about family than it is about love. And the romance is between more grounded and flawed characters where comedy is drawn out of their pains and frustrations. It is still idealised and magical in many ways, but it's also more human. There's more characterisation to the people. It's not a high art film, no, but it is very good, and I think that's everything I need to say. So let me know your thoughts. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, or support me on Patreon if you want to do that, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And a special thank you goes to Devin, David Kling, Darren Burdock-Latter, Kestrel, Biden Booked Streak, Tommy Steamrod, Samara Salsi, Sharikov2814 and Joshua C. Follier. Thank you.